Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller, your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
My wife left me for her CEO and helped him steal the company I founded. She thought I was powerless. By the time they learned who controlled every voting share, their victory party had already become a federal investigation. The night handed me the divorce papers. She wore the pearl earrings I had given her on our 10th anniversary. She placed the envelope between us on the dining table, then smoothed it flat with 2 fingers. The movement was calm, almost ceremonial. Beside the front door stood a black suitcase I had never seen before. "I already signed," she said. "You only have to accept that this is over." I opened the envelope and read the first page. She wanted the house, half of our visible investments, and a clean separation before the end of the quarter. The language was efficient. Someone expensive had prepared it. "Is there someone else?" I asked. Her eyes flickered toward the hallway, where her phone rested on a side table. Then she looked back at me with the faint smile she had begun using whenever she thought I was being slow. "Victor understands me." Victor Hale, Chief Executive Officer of Systems. The man had praised for 3 years over dinners she barely touched. Victor was decisive. Victor was fearless. Victor could enter a room and make everyone listen. According to, he was everything I had failed to become. She believed I was a quiet corporate risk consultant who worked from home, traveled without explanation, and showed no interest in status. She believed my best years were behind me. She believed Victor had given her access to a world I could only observe from the sidewalk. What she did not know was that I had founded Systems 17 years earlier. What she did not know was that Victor worked for me, and what neither of them knew was that I had spent the previous 6 weeks documenting their attempt to steal my company. I signed the papers, blinked. She had prepared herself for anger, pleading, perhaps a humiliating effort to bargain. My silence unsettled her more than any accusation could have. "You're not going to fight?" she asked. "No, that's all." I pushed the documents back across the table. "You should tell Victor to postpone tomorrow's board vote." Her fingers stopped on the envelope. "What board vote?" "The one he thinks will make him the owner of." For the first time that evening, the confidence left her face. She recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "What?" "You should practice that sentence. You may need it again." I stood, took my coat from the back of the chair, and walked toward the door. Followed me into the hall. "Where are you going?" "To give you time to decide whether this is really the life you want." "I already decided." "Yes," I said, "you did." My hand was on the doorknob when she said, "Victor told me you would try to frighten me." I turned back. "Did he also tell you who owns Morrow Capital?" Her mouth opened, but no answer came. Morrow Capital was the private holding company that controlled 67% of voting shares. Its ownership records were sealed behind lawyers, trusts, and a structure designed to keep my name out of the public filings. Had spent months trying to discover the person behind it. She had failed. "Tell Victor Daniel Mercer said no," I said. Then I stepped outside. The air was cold. Rain had begun to collect along the curb, turning the streetlights into long silver streaks. I sat in my car but did not start the engine. Through the front window, I watched stand motionless in the hall. Then she grabbed her phone. She called Victor before the door had fully closed. I knew because the monitoring system on the company-issued phone sent a notification to mine. One outgoing call, Victor Hale, 11:43 p.m. I placed the phone on the passenger seat. There are moments when a life ends without anyone dying. No explosion, no witness. Only a sentence spoken across a table, followed by the quiet understanding that the person you loved has chosen to become your enemy. I did not feel rage. Rage is loud and hungry. It consumes energy before the battle begins. What I felt was clarity. Tomorrow, Victor planned to take my company, planned to stand beside him while he did it. And both of them believed the man they had betrayed would be too weak to stop them. I started the car. By sunrise, I intended to teach them the difference between weakness and restraint. I met 12 years before she said Victor's name across our dining table. At the time, Systems occupied 2 floors of a converted warehouse near the river. The roof leaked during heavy rain. Our server room overheated every summer, and the company's most reliable coffee machine had been repaired with electrical tape. Arrived as a communications contractor hired to prepare us for our first major investment round. She was sharp, funny, and unimpressed by titles. On her second day, she corrected my presentation in front of 6 executives and told me no one trusted a founder who used the phrase market leading 3 times on one slide. I hired her permanently before the week ended. We married 2 years later. She knew I had founded. She also knew I had stepped away after my father died. What she did not know was how much control I had kept. That part had not begun as a secret from her. It began as protection. My father worked until the week before his heart attack. He spent his life measuring love through sacrifice, then discovered too late that his family had learned to live without him. At his funeral, I looked at the people who called him successful and understood that success could be another form of abandonment. I did not want to become my entire identity. So I created Morrow Capital, transferred my controlling shares into it, and placed daily operations in the hands of professional executives. Publicly, I became an outside advisor. Privately, I remained the final authority over acquisitions, executive appointments, and any transaction that threatened control. New Morrow existed, but she believed independent investors owned it. Early in our marriage, I planned to explain everything. Then a former executive was kidnapped in an attempted extortion scheme after his family's holdings became public. Our lawyers advised me to keep the beneficial ownership confidential, even from extended relatives. Never asked for details. For years, the secrecy seemed harmless. We lived comfortably but not extravagantly. I drove an old sedan. We stayed in small hotels when we traveled. When wanted a larger house, I bought one through a conventional mortgage instead of paying cash. I wanted a normal life with a woman who loved me before she loved what I owned. For a long time, I believed I had won. Then Victor arrived. He was 41, recently divorced, and already famous in corporate circles for rescuing a technology company from bankruptcy. He had the gift of making ambition sound like duty. When he demanded more authority, he called it accountability. When he removed rivals, he called it efficiency. I hired him because needed a public leader who enjoyed power enough to carry its weight. At first, he was exceptional. Revenue tripled. Employee turnover fell. He expanded us into Europe without sacrificing product quality. Investors loved him. Journalists quoted him. And younger managers the way he rolled up his sleeves before difficult meetings. Admired him immediately. Her admiration did not worry me. Competent people deserve recognition. I even encouraged Victor to promote her when he said she had communications and could lead strategic relations. That promotion changed her. She began coming home later. She replaced her practical clothes with expensive suits. She spoke about people in terms of usefulness. At dinner, she compared my quiet consulting work with Victor's visible victories. "You could have been like him," she once said. "I hired him," I replied. She laughed, thinking I meant that I had once recommended him to the board. "No, Daniel. People like Victor are not hired by people like you. They tolerate people like you." I should have corrected her then. Instead, I studied her face and wondered when affection had become contempt. The answer arrived slowly. It appeared in the way she stopped asking about my work, in the way she interrupted me but listened when Victor called, in the way she began describing patience as fear. Still, I did not suspect an affair until the first security report reached my desk. Even then, I searched for an innocent explanation. That is what love does when it is afraid of the truth. It turns evidence into coincidence and silence into mercy. But the night named Victor as the man who understood her. Every discarded warning returned at once. She had not merely chosen another man. She had chosen the one man in, with enough authority to threaten everything I had built. And by saying his name, she told me the betrayal was larger than our marriage. Morrow Capital existed because visibility is not the same as power. The public filings listed 3 trustees, 2 legal administrators, and a registered office in Delaware. Analysts described Morrow as secretive, conservative, and almost impossible to contact. Victor often complained that controlling shareholder behaved like a ghost. He was right. The ghost attended every major board meeting through encrypted audio. It reviewed every acquisition above $50 million. It approved executive compensation and kept a private veto over changes to voting rights. The ghost was me. Only 4 people inside knew the truth. The lead independent director, Samuel, our general counsel, Henry Cole, my oldest business partner, and Price, the head of internal security. Each had signed agreements designed less to protect my wealth than to protect the company from becoming a cult around its founder. Had grown because talented people believed their decisions mattered. I wanted them to lead without turning to me every time the market changed. Victor mistook my absence for weakness. The first time he challenged Morrow openly was during an acquisition meeting 18 months before the divorce. He wanted to purchase a smaller competitor at twice its audited value. Morrow rejected the proposal after our investigators discovered that one of Victor's friends held a hidden interest in the target company. Victor the deal without protest, but from that day, he began asking questions. Who had authority to speak for Morrow? Who benefited from its dividends? Why had the original founder disappeared from public life? Could the controlling shares be diluted under emergency provisions? Most questions were legal, some were not. Helped him search. As Senior Vice President for Strategic Relations, she could access board summaries, investor communications, and certain ownership documents. She knew enough to understand that Morrow controlled, but not enough to identify the person behind it. Their messages, later recovered from a private server, showed the progression. At first, Victor asked to locate routine documents. Then he asked about my early role in the company. Then he asked whether I kept files at home. Answered eagerly, Daniel never talks about the old days. Daniel has no real influence anymore. Daniel keeps backups in the locked cabinet in his office. Reading those messages hurt more than discovering the affair. Desire can make people reckless, but contempt requires rehearsal. Had been reducing me in private for months, turning our marriage into evidence that I was harmless. She told Victor I lacked ambition. She told him I avoided conflict. She told him I could be pressured into signing anything if the confrontation became uncomfortable enough. Victor believed her because he had watched me remain silent in meetings where he expected resistance. He did not understand that silence gave people room to reveal their intentions. I began examining every transaction he had sponsored during the previous 2 years. The pattern emerged slowly, consulting payments to firms linked to old associates, unusual licensing agreements, bonuses triggered by performance numbers calculated through methods he had personally changed. Nothing was large enough to cause alarm alone. Together, they formed a shadow system through which Victor rewarded loyalty and punished scrutiny. Still, corruption was not the same as a takeover. The takeover appeared in a draft memorandum discovered by Steam. It proposed issuing a new class of supervoting shares during a so-called ownership emergency. The shares would be sold to an external entity chosen by executive management. Once issued, Morrow's 67% economic stake would carry less than 30% of the voting power. Victor could not activate the emergency clause unless he proved Morrow intended to sell to a hostile buyer. No such sale existed, so he needed to invent one. That was why he had begun searching my office. That was why she requested files beyond her authorization. And that was why, 6 weeks before the divorce, I decided not to stop them. Not yet. A thief interrupted at the door can claim he entered by mistake. A thief allowed to open the safe, remove the money, and sign his own name leaves no room for innocence. I called into my private office. How certain are we? I asked. Victor is building the mechanism, she said. Is looking for the justification. Can we trace a document through every transfer? She understood immediately. You want to give them one. I want to give them the exact lie they are searching for. Studied me, and if your wife takes it. I looked through the glass wall toward the city below. Then I stopped calling this suspicion. The file was called Project Lantern. It contained 83 pages of financial projections, legal opinions, and correspondence describing a proposed sale of Morrow Capital's shares to a foreign investment consortium. The buyer was fictional. The lawyers named in the correspondence had helped create the deception. The numbers were plausible enough to survive a hurried review and flawed enough to collapse under proper scrutiny. Every page carried an invisible watermark linked to account. Placed the file in a restricted archive that could reach only by using an executive override. We also created a warning screen reminding users that unauthorized access could lead to termination and criminal referral. Then we waited. Opened the archive at 10:18 on a Tuesday night. I was sitting alone in the kitchen when the alert appeared on my laptop. User Mercer. File accessed Project Lantern. Override accepted. Download initiated. For 47 seconds, the progress bar moved across my screen. I could have canceled the transfer. I could have called her upstairs, turned the laptop toward her, and demanded an explanation. Part of me wanted to. Not because I expected honesty, but because the man who still remembered our first apartment wanted one final reason to believe she had not crossed the line. The download completed. 3 minutes later, the file was to a portable drive. At 10:31, left the house carrying her work bag. She paused beside me in the kitchen. Victor needs me at the office. At this hour. It's an emergency. What kind? She looked at the open laptop, though the monitoring window was minimized. Investor relations. I nodded, drive safely. For a moment, she seemed disappointed by the absence of suspicion. Then she kissed my cheek and left. The kiss felt like an insult delivered softly. Tracked the drive through a beacon hidden in the file's metadata. Did not go to headquarters. She drove to Victor's penthouse. The file opened on his home network at 11:04. By midnight, it had been twice. The next morning, Victor requested an emergency strategy session to discuss a potential change in ownership. He claimed an anonymous source had warned him that Morrow was negotiating with an aggressive overseas fund. He never mentioned Project Lantern. During the meeting, he displayed 3 pages from it on the screen. I attended remotely under my consultant credentials. Victor could not see my camera, but I watched him present the lie I had written as if he had uncovered it through instinct. "This company is facing an existential threat," he said. "If Morrow sells, could be broken apart within months." Several executives reacted with alarm. Sat to his right. She kept her face composed, but her hand rested too close to his beneath the table. Victor proposed a defensive restructuring. Would issue a special class of voting shares to a trusted outside entity. That entity would hold the shares temporarily, protecting the company until the ownership threat passed. The trusted entity was advisory, had been incorporated 12 weeks earlier by a former college roommate of Victor's. The listed office was a mailbox. The company had no employees, no operational history, and no capital sufficient to purchase anything. Yet Victor proposed lending it the money to buy new shares. He was planning to use company funds to seize company control. After the meeting, called me. "Did you hear Victor's presentation?" she asked. "I did. He may be the only person capable of saving. From a sale no one has. You always need perfect certainty. Leaders act before certainty arrives." "Is that what Victor told you?" Her voice hardened. "You sound jealous." "Of what?" "Of a man who matters." The line went silent between us. I could hear traffic through her car speakers. She was not at the office. Later, the location records showed she was leaving Victor's building. I said, "Where did he get the document?" "I don't know." "You're sure?" "Stop interrogating me." She ended the call. That was the first lie I could prove. It would not be the last. Once Victor believed Project Lantern was real, he moved faster than I expected. Within 4 days, he formed a private takeover committee consisting of the chief operating officer, 2 loyal directors, and an outside lawyer named Preston Vale. Their meetings were not recorded in the official board calendar. They used personal devices and rented conference rooms under false names. None of that protected them. The Project Lantern file contained more than a watermark. It carried a dormant reporting mechanism designed to activate whenever its pages were printed or attached to a message. Each action created a record on a secure server controlled by Steam. We watched the conspiracy grow in real time. Victor sent selected pages to Vale. Vale drafted an opinion arguing that Morrow's supposed sale triggered emergency defense provisions. Prepared talking points accusing Morrow of abandoning employees. The chief operating officer calculated which departments could be pressured into supporting the restructuring. Their confidence increased with every step. So did their carelessness. On the 5th night, Victor and met at a private restaurant near the marina. His investigator occupied the next booth. The restaurant was loud enough to encourage honesty and quiet enough for the recording device hidden in his jacket. Victor told the board vote would happen within 3 weeks. "When it passes, Morrow becomes irrelevant," he said, "and controls the shares." "We control," lowered her voice. "When do we tell Daniel?" Victor laughed. "We don't tell him anything. He signs the divorce, you take the house, and by the time he understands what happened, he will have no connection to. He still knows people there. People tolerate him because they think he has history. Once I remove his consulting contract, he becomes a man telling stories about a company that moved on." Said nothing for several seconds. Then she asked, "And my position?" "Chief Strategy Officer after the vote. With equity, with everything you deserve." I listened to that recording the following morning. Victor's promises were precise enough to create loyalty and vague enough to avoid obligation. Heard a future. I heard leverage. Wanted to stop them immediately. "We have theft, misrepresentation, and a direct conflict of interest," she said during a meeting in my office. "Remove Victor now. Suspend. Protect the company before this damages employees." "Not yet. You are letting personal feelings distort your judgment." "No, personal feelings would make me confront them before we know the full network." Pace to the window. "How much more do you need?" "I need the board members who are willing to approve it. I need the lenders willing to finance it. and I need proof that Victor intends to keep control after the emergency ends. What? You already know he does. Knowing is not proving. She turned toward me, and I looked at the printed transcript on my desk. I offered her honesty without telling her what I knew. She chose Victor. That is not what I asked. I understood the question. Did I still hope to save the marriage? Hope is dangerous when it disguises itself as patience. I don't know, I said. His expression softened. Then decide before the boardroom decides for you. That night I returned home early, was packing a small suitcase in our bedroom. She said she had to attend a 2-day leadership retreat. Victor had organized it for senior executives. I knew no retreat existed. She folded a red dress and placed it beneath a silk blouse. I said, "Are you happy?" She stopped packing. What kind of question is that? A direct one. I'm building something important. That isn't an answer. She zipped the suitcase. Maybe happiness comes after success. And if success costs you everything you already have. She looked at me with irritation, not fear. You wouldn't understand. She carried the suitcase downstairs. I stood in the bedroom and listened to the front door close. The trap was working. The problem with traps is that they do not choose who steps inside. Returned from her false retreat on Sunday afternoon. She entered the house carrying the same suitcase and the scent of a cologne I did not wear. She kissed the air beside my cheek, said she was exhausted, and went upstairs without asking how my weekend had been. An hour later, I went to move her car from the driveway. Beneath the passenger seat, something caught the light. It was a silver cufflink, engraved with the initials VH. I placed it on the kitchen counter and waited. When came downstairs, she saw it before she saw me. Her steps slowed, but only for a moment. Where did you find that? In your car. Victor must have dropped it when I drove him to the airport. What airport? She opened the refrigerator. Baltimore. You said the retreat was in Annapolis. What? He flew out afterward. I watched her reach for a bottle of water. Her hand was steady. Lying had become familiar enough to require no preparation. Are you accusing me? She asked. No. Then stop staring at me like that. Like what? Like a disappointed father. I'm your husband. For now. The words escaped before she could soften them. She closed the refrigerator and crossed her arms. You've been distant for years, Daniel. You hide behind calmness because you're terrified of wanting anything. Do you want Victor? Her expression sharpened. You have no right to interrogate me. That is not a denial. She picked up the cufflink. You know what your problem is? You think silence makes you superior. It doesn't, it makes you weak. Then she walked upstairs. The next morning, the cufflink was gone. So was a portable drive from the locked cabinet in my office. Did not know the drive was empty. She also did not know that opening the cabinet triggered a camera concealed inside a smoke detector. The recording showed her entering at 2:14 a.m., using a key and searching every shelf before selecting the drive. She held it for several seconds, staring at the label. Morrow Ownership Backup. The label was another invitation. At 8:07, the drive connected to Victor's office computer. It contained a single encrypted folder. When his technicians tried to open it, the system captured their credentials and created a complete image of the machine. His team discovered draft contracts, private messages, and a spreadsheet dividing executive positions after the takeover. His promised title appeared near the bottom. Chief Strategy Officer, 2-year provisional term. Termination permitted without cause. Victor had promised her equity. The spreadsheet assigned her none. I considered showing it to her. Instead, I printed the page and locked it in my desk. Truth offered too early can become another lie's enemy. I needed to see Victor clearly, but not because I rescued her. She had to reach the truth through the consequences of her own choices. That evening, she announced she was moving out temporarily. Victor has an apartment the company uses for executives, she said. I need space. What? Is Victor living there? She lifted her chin. I'm done answering questions. I carried her suitcase to the door. She looked almost offended by the help. You're really going to let me leave? You decided to go. Fight for something once in your life. I set the suitcase beside her. I am. She did not understand. Not yet. I gave 3 chances. The first came before she moved out. I placed a separation agreement on her desk. It offered her the house, 2 investment accounts, and enough money to begin again without debt. In return, she had to surrender all material and sign a statement confirming she had never shared confidential documents. She read it twice. You planned this. I'm giving you a clean exit. You think you can buy me? No, I think you have already chosen to leave. And if I refuse, the divorce becomes less comfortable. She smiled. Victor said you would try to intimidate me with paperwork. Does Victor know what you took from my office? Her smile vanished. I didn't take anything. I pushed a pen toward her. Sign, return the files, and walk away. She tore the agreement in half. The second chance came 1 week later. I met her at a quiet near headquarters. She arrived 20 minutes late wearing a new watch that cost more than the car she had once complained I refused to replace. Victor bought it, I asked. That is none of your business. I placed an envelope on the table. Inside were copies of the access warnings she had bypassed and a single still image of her entering my office at night. I had blurred the drive in her hand, stared at the photograph. What do you want? The truth. You installed cameras to spy on me. In my secured office. You're sick. I'm offering you another opportunity to stop. She slid the photograph back. Victor's lawyers will destroy you if you threaten me. Ask them to examine the image first. She left without finishing her coffee. The third chance came on the morning of the board vote. By then, the divorce petition had been filed, and Victor were living openly in his penthouse. Corporate gossip sites had begun describing them as new power couple. At 9:12 a.m., while she sat in the boardroom with the signature packet before her, I sent one message. Do not sign anything. Leave the room now. She read it immediately. For several seconds, the typing indicator appeared and disappeared. Then her reply arrived. You do not control me anymore. I saved the message. Sat beside me in a car across the street from headquarters. 2 attorneys occupied the front seats. A secure tablet showed the boardroom feed. Was that the last chance? Asked. Yes. You sound certain. I'm not certain I'm finished. There is a difference. Certainty belongs to people who believe they understand every consequence. Being finished means accepting that understanding is no longer necessary. On the screen, Victor began his presentation. Watched him with the expression she once gave me when signed its first national contract. Pride, trust, possession. She believed she was watching her future take shape. I watched the last door close behind her. A stoic man is not a man without feeling. He is a man who refuses to let feeling negotiate against reality. I had loved. I might have forgiven an affair confessed in shame. I might even have forgiven stolen documents returned before they caused harm. But she had been warned 3 times. Each time, she chose the lie that promised her more power. By the time Victor distributed the final agreements, I no longer saw a wife who had lost her way. I saw an executive participating in fraud. That was the person I would face in the boardroom. Victor did not wait for the vote to begin removing resistance. He placed Chief Financial Officer on administrative leave after she questions funding. He fired 2 compliance officers for what he called cultural obstruction. He opened an ethics investigation into using an anonymous complaint written by his own attorney. Then he came for me. His assistant summoned me to the executive floor 2 days before the vote. Sat beside him when I entered, dressed in white and wearing the watch he had given her. Victor remained behind his desk. Daniel, this will not take long. He slid a termination letter across the polished surface. You have lost the confidence of executive leadership. As a consultant, as everything. Watched for my reaction. The letter canceled my advisory contract, revoked building access, and ordered me to return all company property. It also accused me of spreading concerns about management without evidence. You signed this? I asked. I reviewed the communications language. Victor smiled. She improved it. I folded the letter and placed it inside my jacket. You are barring me from property, effective immediately, and Friday's board meeting. You will not attend. I nodded. Victor leaned back. You have been orbiting this company for years, pretending your history gives you influence. It doesn't. Has men like you. What kind of men? Careful men, invisible men. Men who mistake hesitation for wisdom. His mouth curved slightly. You should postpone the vote, I said. Victor laughed. Or what? Or you may learn that invisible men still cast shadows. His smile tightened. I stood and walked to the door. Followed me into the corridor. Daniel. I stopped. For 1 second I thought she might say she was sorry. Instead, she lowered her voice. Do not embarrass yourself on Friday. I won't. You cannot stop this. I know. That answer confused her. She believed surrender was the only reason a man would speak without threat. As I entered the elevator, Victor called after her. She turned immediately and walked back into his office. The doors closed between us. Met me in the underground garage. My termination had been expected. The revocation meant nothing because security answered to the board, not Victor. He ordered the deletion of 2 compliance archives, she said. Were they deleted? Copies were preserved. His order was recorded, and the bank approved a bridge facility this morning using assets as collateral. Without board authority, preliminary authority signed by Victor and the operating officer. That crossed the final legal boundary. Until then, Victor could argue that he was preparing a defensive transaction. By pledging company assets to finance his private vehicle, he converted ambition into fraud. I called federal investigators who had been briefed by our attorneys. They agreed to wait until after the board vote. They wanted signed documents, completed transfers, and clear proof of intent. Victor thought he was fighting moral capital. He did not understand that the private war was already over. All that remained was to let him declare victory in front of witnesses. Advisory was designed to look independent. Its registered owner, Thomas Reed, had shared a college apartment with Victor 20 years earlier. Reed now operated a failing chain of fitness clubs and owed more than $4 million to private lenders. In exchange for clearing part of that debt, he agreed to place his name on documents. Victor believed the arrangement could not be traced. He underestimated desperate men. Once investigators approached Reed with copies of the bank records, he asked for an attorney before they finished the first page. By sunset, he had agreed to cooperate. Reed provided voice messages, draft agreements, and a private ledger showing how Victor planned to distribute after the takeover. The most revealing document was titled Founder Transition. It contained my name. Victor intended to portray me as a disgruntled former employee falsely claiming influence over Morrow. His communications team had prepared statements describing my mental state as unstable, had supplied personal details to make the story credible. Daniel has struggled since his father's death. Daniel exaggerates his early contribution. Daniel has become obsessed with the company. She had transformed my grief into a weapon. The plan went beyond firing me. They intended to erase me from history. Company archives would be revised. Interviews would credit Victor with the modern platform. My founder status would remain in legal records but disappear from public materials. I read the documents alone. Anger came then, clean and sharp. Not because I needed my name on a wall. Had never been built by one man, but knew what the company meant to me. She had stood in the warehouse on opening day. She had heard me describe the Knights Henry, and I slept beside the servers because we could not afford security. She knew the truth and volunteered to bury it. I closed the file and called Samuel. Prepare resolutions removing Victor and every officer who participated, I said. For cause, and... The pause after her name was respectful but unnecessary. Include her. Samuel exhaled. Understood. That evening, Victor appeared on a financial news program. He spoke about protecting from irresponsible ownership. Stood behind the cameras, invisible to viewers but reflected in the studio glass. Victor said leadership required courage under uncertainty. He said employees deserved executives willing to act. He said future could not be controlled by anonymous people hiding behind legal structures. I almost admired the performance. A convincing liar rarely invents a new morality. He steals a true principle and uses it to conceal a false purpose. Victor was right about one thing. Ownership should carry accountability. That was why I would enter the boardroom myself. For 17 years, Morrow Capital had spoken through lawyers and sealed directives. On Friday, the ghost would take a chair at the table, asked whether revealing my identity was necessary. It cannot be hidden again once you do this, she warned. I know. You built your life around privacy. Privacy protected the company while honest people ran it. Now secrecy protects the dishonest ones. She nodded. The false owner had served his purpose. It was time for the real one to be seen. On the night before the vote, Victor hosted a private dinner in the penthouse now called home. A photographer captured the guests arriving. 2 directors, the chief operating officer, Preston Vale, and 3 investors expecting preferred access after the takeover. The images reached me through a contact at the building. Wore the red dress she had packed for the false retreat. Victor raised a glass at 9:30. The apartment's smart system recorded the speech because he had linked it to an unsecured corporate account. Tomorrow, he told them, will finally belong to the people who built its future rather than the ghosts who own its past. The guests applauded, stood beside him. Victor announced that she would become Chief Strategy Officer after the restructuring. He praised her courage and said none of it would have been possible without her access and loyalty. Access and loyalty. He did not say love. Later, when the guests had gone, their conversation changed. Asked when her equity agreement would be signed. After the vote, Victor said, You promised it would be ready tonight. There are tax issues. How much equity? Enough. That is not a number. His voice hardened. Do not become difficult now. I risked my marriage for this. You ended a marriage that was already dead. I risked prison. There was a long silence. Then Victor said, only guilty people talk like that. Lowered her voice. You told me Mara was breaking the law. I told you needed protection. Those are not the same thing. No, they are not. She was beginning to understand, but understanding arrived too late to become courage. Instead of leaving, she apologized. At 11:08, Victor called Preston Vale from the balcony. Prepare the contingency documents, he said. If anything goes wrong, the file trail ends with her. Vale asked whether knew. Of course not. That sentence confirmed the second betrayal. Victor had prepared a resignation letter bearing digital signature. He had transferred operational responsibility to her and drafted a statement claiming she had obtained Project Lantern independently. If authorities intervened, he would describe himself as another executive deceived by an ambitious employee. I could have warned her. Instead, at 11:42, I sent one final email containing no accusation. Come home tonight. Tell me everything before 9 tomorrow morning, and I will make sure the truth distinguishes between what you did and what Victor made you believe. She opened it 6 minutes later. No reply came. At midnight, she posted a photograph from Victor's balcony. The city glittered behind them. His arm rested around her waist. Her caption read, "Some futures require the courage to leave the past behind." I closed the image. People often celebrate too early because celebration silences doubt. Music, champagne, and witnesses can make a bad decision feel permanent enough to become right. Victor and went asleep believing the next day would crown them. Across the city, attorneys organized evidence boxes. Investigators prepared warrants, collected signed proxies from Moro Capital, and I placed my father's old fountain pen inside my jacket. It was the pen I had used to sign the incorporation papers. The next signature it witnessed would end Victor's career. Friday morning began with my photograph on his internal security list. Victor had ordered reception to deny me entry. The notice described me as a terminated consultant who might attempt to disrupt official business. Beneath the photograph was a warning to contact executive security if I appeared. Sent me a copy at 7:15. He wants the whole building to watch you get turned away, she said. Let him keep the notice active. You have every legal right to enter. I know. The humiliation was part of Victor's plan. He wanted employees to see the old advisor removed while he announced the new ownership structure. By evening, the company's story would have a hero and a defeated relic. I arrived across the street at 8:40 and remained in the car with. Our attorneys occupied another vehicle in the underground garage. Investigators waited 2 blocks away, prepared to enter once documents were signed. At 9:30, Victor began the meeting. The boardroom feed showed 21 people around the long glass table. Senior managers sat along the wall. 3 institutional investors joined by video. Sat to Victor's right with a leather folder before her. Victor spoke without notes. He described Moro Capital as unstable and unreachable. He displayed Project Lantern on the screen and claimed faced imminent sale to a hostile foreign buyer. He warned that thousands of employees could lose their jobs if the board failed to act. Then he presented, "We'll hold the new voting shares in trust for long-term independence," he said. Not one slide mentioned that he and were hidden beneficiaries. A director asked how would finance the purchase. Victor answered smoothly, "A secured bridge facility supported by future dividends." He did not say itself guaranteed the loan. Watch beside me, her face expressionless. "He is better than I expected," she said. "That is why he was dangerous." Victor called for discussion. The 2 directors loyal to him praised his leadership. The operating officer said delay would be irresponsible. Preston Vale presented his legal opinion and carefully avoided mentioning where the alleged sale document came from. Then spoke. She told the board she had spent years communicating with employees and knew how deeply they feared distant ownership. She said needed leaders who were present, accountable, and willing to protect what others had built. What others had built. She used those words while preparing to erase the person who had built it. Victor distributed the signature packets. Each participant received a different set of pages. This packet included her declaration that Project Lantern had reached executive management through a protected source. Signing it would turn her previous lies into formal evidence. Her pen hovered above the page. My message remained on her phone. "Do not sign anything. Leave the room now. For 1 second, she looked toward the door. I wondered whether some memory had reached her. The warehouse. Our first apartment. The morning we painted the original sign together because we could not afford a professional one. Victor placed his hand over hers. The gesture lasted only a moment. Signed. Then Victor signed. One by one, the others followed. The final signature activated the preliminary transfer. Became the registered holder of the new voting shares, subject to shareholder validation. It also completed the fraud. Closed the tablet cover. Ready. I looked at the building where security had been ordered to reject my name. They wanted to fire the founder, I said. Let us give them the opportunity in person. We crossed the street. The lobby fell silent when I entered. 2 receptionists looked from me to the security alert on their screens. A junior guard stepped forward, nervous but determined. Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry. Your access has been revoked. I know. You cannot proceed beyond reception. Emerged from the elevators before he reached for his radio. This visitor is cleared under board authority, she said. The guard hesitated. The chief executive issued direct instructions. The chief executive does not control board security during a shareholder intervention. Entered behind me with our attorneys. The guard looked at the group, then at the notice bearing my photograph. Should I remove the alert? He asked. No, I said. Leave it visible. I wanted the record to remain exactly as Victor had created it. We rode to the 42nd floor without speaking. In my pocket, my phone still displayed reply. You do not control me anymore. She misunderstood the warning. I had not asked her to leave because I wanted control over her. I had asked because a decision remains voluntary only until its consequences become unavoidable. The elevator opened into the executive corridor. Through the glass boardroom wall, I saw Victor standing at the head of the table. Champagne waited on a service cart. Its representative had joined by video, smiling from a small square on the wall display. Noticed me first. Her expression changed, but she said nothing. Victor followed her gaze and turned. I could not hear his first words through the glass, but I saw him point toward the corridor. An assistant hurried to the door and opened it only far enough to step outside. You are not authorized to be on this floor, she said. Held up a sealed resolution. Open the door. The assistant looked back at Victor. He shook his head, placed her access card against the panel. The lock released. When the door opened, Victor's voice filled the room. This meeting is restricted. Entered first, not anymore. I followed her to the table. Victor's face remained controlled, but his left hand tightened around the presentation remote. You were terminated, he said, from my advisory position. You have no role in this transaction. I have the only role that matters. Stood, Daniel, please leave. I looked at the signed packet before her. You received my message. This is not the place. It was the last place available. She glanced toward Victor. You are making a scene because you cannot accept that our marriage is over. That was the explanation they had prepared. A rejected husband, an unstable former employee, a man using personal resentment to interrupt serious leaders. I let the silence hold long enough for everyone to hear how convenient her accusation was. Then I placed my father's fountain pen on the table. I am not here to discuss my marriage. Victor gave a humorless smile. Then state your business. Distributed a 1-page document to every director. At the top were the words, written consent of the controlling shareholder. Victor read the first paragraph. The smile left his face. The consent suspended the transaction, froze all related accounts, and called an immediate special session under Morrow Capital's voting authority. You cannot represent Morrow, Victor said. I took the chair at the far end of the table, the seat traditionally left empty for the controlling shareholder's representative. No, I said, I own it. Disbelief moved through the room in stages. First came silence, then the rustle of paper as directors reread the consent, then whispers from the executives seated along the wall. Victor stared at me as if refusing to understand could make the statement false. Spoke first. That is impossible. I opened the folder placed before me. Inside was Morrow Capital's complete ownership chain, certified that morning by the trustees and outside counsel. I slid the documents toward Victor. Daniel Elias Mercer, sole beneficial owner, 67% of systems, voting equity before the unlawful issue. Founder's veto over any change to control. Victor read the final page twice. This can be fabricated. Samuel, the general counsel, cleared his throat. The documents have been authenticated. Victor turned on him. You knew. I confirmed the ownership this morning. You work for me. I work for. That answer struck harder than an accusation. picked up the ownership chart. Her eyes moved from my name to the trust structures and back again. You told me you left the company. I left daily management. You let me believe you had nothing. I let you believe what you chose to believe. Her face flushed. You deceived me for 12 years. I protected confidential ownership. You stole confidential files. That is different. Yes, I said, it is. Victor recovered enough to stand. Even if this structure is legitimate, the board approved. Morrow's voting position has already been diluted. Open the corporate bylaws. The issue required disclosure of all beneficial interests and independent funding. Disclosed neither. Our legal opinion says otherwise. Your legal opinion relied on fraudulent facts. Preston Vale shifted in his chair. I object to that characterization. You may explain it to investigators, I said. Several people looked toward the doors. Victor ignored them. This is revenge. A jealous husband has manipulated corporate procedure to punish his wife. I looked around the table, then let the evidence decide. Connected a secured drive to the presentation system. Victor's slides disappeared. A timeline replaced them. Project Lantern created. Unauthorized access. The download. The portable drive connection at Victor's penthouse. The pages sent to Preston Vale. Sin Corporation. Assets pledged without authority. Each event appeared with timestamps and source records. Lowered herself into her chair. Victor remained standing. You manufactured the document, he said. Yes. A murmur passed through the room. I continued before he could use the admission. It was a controlled integrity test placed in a restricted archive. Access required to bypass a written security warning. No one asked her to take it. No one asked her to transfer it. No one asked you to present it as evidence. You entrapped us. I gave you false information. You chose theft, concealment, and fraud. Victor pointed at me. You wanted this outcome. No, I wanted to know whether the people running my company could be trusted. I turned toward. Her signed declaration lay open before her. The test ended when she downloaded the file. Everything after that was your decision. Victor looked around the room for support. The directors who had praised him minutes earlier avoided his eyes. Power had shifted without a raised voice. I rested my hands on the table. Now, I said, we will examine every lie used to create this vote. The first lie was the hostile sale. Displayed sworn statements from every trustee of Morrow Capital, confirming that no negotiations had occurred. The foreign consortium named in Project Lantern did not exist. Its address belonged to a legal services company working under our direction. The second lie was independence. Bank records showed payments from Victor to Thomas Reed. Private agreements identified Victor and as hidden beneficiaries. A voice message captured Victor instructing Reed to remain outside the country until the vote ended. The third lie was the financing. Had contributed no capital. Victor and the operating officer had pledged assets to secure the loan. If the takeover failed, the company would owe millions for an entity created to steal its voting rights. The fourth lie was the emergency. Internal messages showed Victor discussing the restructuring months before Project Lantern appeared. He had not reacted to a threat. He had been waiting for an excuse. Each record appeared on the wall display. Victor challenged everything. He called the emails incomplete, the recordings illegal, the bank documents misunderstood. His confidence became louder as its foundation disappeared. Said almost nothing, then opened the private messages between them. Victor, find out what Daniel keeps at home. He still has old ownership backups. Victor, can you access them? He trusts me. That final sentence remained on the screen. He trusts me. Closed her eyes. I remembered the night she searched my office while I lay awake upstairs. I had heard the floorboard outside the door and forced myself not to move. At the time, some part of me still hoped she would stop before opening the cabinet. Now the hope seemed to belong to another man. Victor turned toward her. You told me the access was authorized. Stared at him. You designed the entire plan. I relied on information you supplied. You said Morrow was committing fraud. I said we had to protect the company. The argument spread cracks across the alliance they had presented as unbreakable. I allowed it to continue for several minutes. People reveal more while defending themselves than while answering questions. Accused Victor of directing the theft. Victor accused her of pursuing him to secure a promotion. Preston Vale claimed he had never been informed of their relationship. The operating officer said he believed belonged to reputable investors. Every accusation created another admission. Finally, I raised one hand. The room became quiet. There is one more set of documents, I said. Victor's expression changed. He knew which documents I meant. displayed 4 files created in Victor's private legal folder 3 days earlier. A resignation letter, a transfer assigning operational control to her, a declaration stating she alone had obtained Project Lantern, a draft statement in which Victor described himself as the victim of a dishonest subordinate. Stood so quickly her chair struck the wall. "What is this?" Victor did not answer. She turned toward him. "You were going to blame me. They were contingency drafts. My signature is on that letter. A digital template. You forged it. I protected the company from your exposure." "My exposure?" Victor's voice became cold. "You took the files, you entered your husband's office, you bypassed the warnings. Do not pretend you were innocent." The truth reached her all at once. She had destroyed our marriage for a man who had prepared to destroy her freedom. "You said we were building a life," she whispered. Victor looked away. He had no answer because no life had ever been part of the plan. Crossed the space between them and slapped Victor. The sound broke the boardroom's silence. He caught her wrist when she tried again. "Control yourself," he said. She pulled free. "You were going to send me to prison. You created the risk. You told me Daniel was irrelevant. He was supposed to be." The words were not intended as a confession, but everyone heard them that way. Victor looked toward the directors. "This personal argument has nothing to do with the validity of the transaction. It has everything to do with disclosure," said. "You concealed a relationship with an executive who supplied stolen information and held a hidden interest in." Victor pointed toward me. "And he concealed ownership from his own wife." "My marriage was not voting on a corporate transaction. You built a trap because you wanted revenge. I built a test because confidential files were being accessed. You let the company approach crisis. No company funds were ever at risk beyond amounts we controlled. The bank cooperated after receiving notice from counsel. The bridge facility could not close without Morrow's validation." For the first time, Victor understood that even his apparent progress had occurred inside boundaries I had set. Had never been close to controlling. The shares existed conditionally. The financing was monitored. The board feed was preserved. Every step had been permitted only long enough to document intent. His victory had been a room built around him. He sat down slowly. "What do you want?" he asked. It was the first honest question he had asked all morning. "Accountability. Money. No. My resignation. That is no longer your decision." He leaned toward me. "We can contain this. Remove me quietly, cancel the transaction, and protect from scandal. If investigators become involved, employees suffer, clients leave. The share price collapses." He was still negotiating through fear. Samuel placed 2 resolutions before me. The first removed Victor as chief executive for cause. The second terminated every officer who had knowingly participated in the scheme. His name appeared on the second page. She saw it. "Daniel," she said, "I can help you. You already have. I will testify against him." "That may help you. It does not restore your position." Her eyes filled. "You cannot treat me like a stranger. You signed documents designed to steal my company. I was manipulated. You were warned." She looked at my father's fountain pen beside the resolutions. "Please." That word might once have changed me. I picked up the pen. Victor watched my hand. "Think carefully. Once you sign, this becomes public war." "No," I said. "The war became public when you invited witnesses to your victory." I signed both resolutions, countersigned them as lead independent director. Samuel announced the removals effective immediately. Deactivated Victor S.'s credentials from her tablet. Their phones disconnected from the company network. The access panels beside the boardroom doors changed from green to red. Victor looked at the doors as if the small light were an insult. Then they opened. 2 federal investigators entered with security. Victor's insurance policy had failed. It had never existed. The investigators did not handcuff Victor in the boardroom. They asked him to accompany them for an interview and informed him that his devices were subject to seizure. He responded with the offended dignity of a man who still believed procedure was evidence of respect. "I will contact my attorney," he said. Preston Vale looked down at the table. Victor noticed. "You are my attorney." Vale swallowed. "I represent in this transaction. Given the allegations, our interests may no longer align." That was the moment Victor finally appeared alone. He looked toward, perhaps expecting the woman who had risked everything for him to stand at his side. She remained near the wall, arms wrapped around herself. "Tell them what happened," he said. She stared at him. "Which version?" One investigator collected Victor's phone. Another placed the signed packet in an evidence sleeve. The celebration champagne remained unopened on the service cart. When Victor reached the door, he turned to me. "You planned this from the beginning." "No," I responded when you began. "You think this makes you a better man." "No." "Then what does it make you?" I considered the question. "A man who gave you responsibility and watched what you did with it." His face tightened. Security escorted him down the corridor. Was interviewed next. Her attorney arrived within an hour. By late afternoon, she had agreed to surrender her devices and provide access to her private accounts. She left the building through a side entrance, while reporters gathered outside the main lobby. The arrests began 3 days later. Victor was charged with conspiracy, wire fraud, falsifying corporate records, and unauthorized use of company assets. The operating officer faced related charges. Thomas Reed entered a cooperation agreement. Preston Vale resigned his license pending an investigation and began negotiating through counsel. Was not arrested immediately. Her messages showed that Victor had misled her about several legal details. But they also proved she had knowingly stolen files, lied to the board, and signed false declarations. Cooperation could reduce the consequences. It could not remove them. Issued a public statement announcing executive misconduct and the cancellation of the transaction. We did not mention my marriage. We did not describe the personal affair. The company had employees who deserved facts, not spectacle. Reporters discovered the rest within days. Headlines called me the secret billionaire husband. Commentators described the boardroom as a revenge ambush. Television hosts debated whether I had entrapped my wife. Strangers celebrated me as if betrayal were entertainment. I refused every interview, became interim chief executive. We reinstated the compliance officers Victor had fired and offered the chief financial officer her position back. Every expense was reimbursed from frozen executive accounts. Clients received private briefings before rumors could become panic. The share price fell for 2 days, then recovered. Victor had predicted scandal would destroy. He had forgotten that institutions survive when leaders tell the truth quickly. 1 week after the board meeting, I visited the warehouse where the company had begun. Still used part of it as a training center. The original painted sign hung above a conference room. An employee in her 20s recognized me from the news. "Are you really the founder?" she asked. "I was one of them." "Why did you hide?" "To make sure the company could exist without needing me, to be the most important person in every room." She looked at the old sign. "Did it work?" "Most of the time." That evening called from an unknown number. I almost let it ring. Then I answered. "Daniel," she said, "I need to see you." Her voice no longer carried contempt. It carried fear. We agreed to meet the next morning in my attorney's office. Before ending the call, she whispered, "I did not know he was going to sacrifice me." I looked at the warehouse sign through the dark glass. "No," I said, "you only knew you were willing to sacrifice me." The following week, I met privately with the employees Victor had removed. Some were angry that the board had allowed him to reach so far. They were right to be angry. I apologized without defending the strategy. Leadership does not become honest by explaining why other people had to endure its risks. We restored their salaries, cleared their records, and gave them authority to rebuild the controls Victor had weakened. One compliance officer told me he had almost resigned from the industry. I asked him to stay long enough to make safer for the next person who decided to speak. He agreed, but not for me. He stayed for the people Victor had taught to remain silent. Arrived without makeup, jewelry, or the confidence she once wore like armor. She sat across from me in a small conference room. Her attorney waited outside at her request. Mine remained near the door until I told him the conversation could be private. For several moments, neither of us spoke. "I am cooperating," she said finally. "I know. They may let me plead to a lesser charge. That is between you and the prosecutors." She looked at her hands. The wedding ring was still there. "I can give you more." "More what?" Victor kept a second ledger. Payments to directors, consultants, people in procurement. He showed it to me once because he wanted me to understand how much influence he had. "Where is it?" "In a storage account under his daughter's middle name." I wrote down the recovery phrase. "Give it to your lawyer." "I want to give it to you." "Why?" Her eyes lifted. "Because I want you to know I am trying to fix this. Helping investigators is not repairing our marriage." She flinched. "I know what I did." "Do you?" "I had an affair. I stole documents. I lied. You decided my worth depended on what you thought I owned." Tears formed, but she blinked them back. "I was angry for years." "At what?" "You never needed me. You never needed anyone. You would disappear into your work, then come home and act calm while I felt invisible. I asked you to tell me when something was wrong. You listened as if you were solving a problem. That may be true. The answer surprised her. I had spent months examining choices. I had also examined my own. I had hidden behind responsibility, believing financial security was the same as emotional presence. I had kept the deepest part of my professional life sealed away and expected trust to survive in the empty space. Those failures explained distance. They did not explain betrayal. I was not a perfect husband, I said. But I did not force you into Victor's bed. I did not place the drive in your hand. I did not make you sign that declaration. I know. Then stop offering pain as permission. Her tears fell. I thought he saw me. He saw access. I understand that now. You understood enough before. She removed the wedding ring and set it on the table. If I testify, return everything, and help recover the money, is there any chance for us? There it was, the question beneath every other sentence. I remembered the woman from the warehouse, laughing with paint on her hands. I remembered hospital nights, birthdays, Sunday mornings, and all the quiet evidence that our marriage had once been real. Forgiveness was possible. Reconciliation was not. I do not want you destroyed, I said. I do not want prison to become the rest of your life. I hope you tell the truth and build something honest afterward. Hope appeared in her face. But you will build it without me. The hope disappeared. Because of Victor? No. Then why? Because when you believed I was powerless, you decided I was worthless. That was not Victor's decision. It was yours. She covered her mouth and cried without sound. I did not comfort her. Cruelty would have been enjoying the pain. Weakness would have been pretending the pain erased what caused it. After several minutes, she pushed a folded page across the table. It contained the recovery phrase for Victor's ledger. I called our attorneys back into the room and handed it to them without reading it. When the meeting ended, left the ring on the table. I left it there too. After she left, I remained in the conference room for nearly an hour. The ring sat where she had placed it, a small circle of gold that once represented a promise and now looked like evidence. My attorney asked whether I wanted it returned to her. I said no. I also refused to keep it. We placed it with the other personal property listed in the divorce inventory. That decision felt colder than throwing it away, but it was cleaner. Some objects deserve neither worship nor destruction. They should simply be handled according to what they have become, not what they once meant. I signed the inventory and walked out without touching it again. Victor's second ledger expanded the case beyond. It documented hidden payments to vendors, favors exchanged for contracts, and bonuses routed through consulting firms. The corruption had begun less than a year after I hired him. Success had not changed Victor. It had simply given his nature a larger room. 3 directors resigned. 2 procurement officers were charged. Recovered millions through frozen accounts and insurance claims. Cooperation mattered. Prosecutors allowed her to plead guilty to unauthorized access and making a false corporate statement. She avoided prison but received probation, community service, and a permanent ban from serving as an officer of a public company. Victor accepted a plea agreement after Thomas Reed and Preston Vale agreed to testify. He received a federal sentence and forfeited his compensation. People called that justice. Justice is rarely as satisfying as stories pretend. No judge returned the months I spent questioning every memory. No recovered money restored trust. No guilty plea changed the fact that hundreds of employees had watched leaders treat their livelihoods as pieces in a private game. Patience had allowed me to prove everything. Patience also had a price. I had listened while lied. I had permitted Victor to remove good employees temporarily. I had watched the scheme approach completion because an unfinished crime is easier to deny. Challenged me about that after the investigations ended. We stood in the restored boardroom, now stripped of Victor's photographs and awards. You were right about the network, she said. We would not have found all of it if we had removed him at the first sign. But there is always a but with you. I waited. You use discipline to avoid admitting when something hurts. That does not make the decisions wrong. No, it makes you difficult to save. I looked at the empty chair where it sat. Was I supposed to be saved? Everyone is eventually, even founders. Her words stayed with me. For years I had treated emotion as weather, real, sometimes violent, but irrelevant to direction. That approach had built a company. It had not built an honest marriage. I began seeing a counselor, not because the newspapers suggested I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why privacy had become isolation. I learned that restraint is useful only when it protects truth. Used carelessly, it can protect fear. I had feared that revealing my ownership would change love. so I never gave her the chance to know the whole man. That did not excuse what she did with the part she knew. But accountability that points only outward becomes another form of pride. We changed the governance structure. No chief executive could again authorize related party financing without independent review. Employees received protected channels to report misconduct directly to the board. Executive relationships involving reporting lines required disclosure. Then I transferred 10% of my shares into an employee ownership trust. Victor had said should belong to the people courageous enough to lead it. His motives were false. The principle was not. When the transfer was announced, employees expected a speech from me. I stood before them in the warehouse training center beneath the original sign. I cannot promise that leaders will never betray your trust, I said. I can promise that no leader should hold enough unchecked power to make betrayal easy. Afterward, the young employee who had asked why I hid approached me again. Did you win? She asked. I thought about Victor's sentence, his empty chair, and the house waiting for me at night. I prevented them from taking the company. That is not what I asked. I smiled despite myself. No, I said, winning is still in progress. The changes cost money and slowed decisions, which made several investors complain. I listened, then kept the safeguards in place. Efficiency had been Victor's favorite excuse. Every locked door, independent review, and protected reporting line looked inefficient until the day it stopped a theft. A company reveals its values through the inconveniences it is willing to preserve. We chose slower approvals over secret power and uncomfortable questions over polished certainty. Within 6 months, employee trust scores rose higher than before the scandal. That did not erase what happened, but it proved recovery was more than a press release. Institutions regain trust the same way people do, through repeated actions that remain honest when no one is applauding. The divorce became final 5 months after the board meeting, did not contest the revised settlement. Once the hidden interest and stolen documents entered the record, the generous agreement she had torn apart became impossible to recover. I did not try to leave her with nothing. She kept her personal savings, her car, and enough from the sale of a small investment property to begin again. My lawyers argued that generosity might be misunderstood as weakness. Then let it be misunderstood, I said. Punishment had never been the objective. The objective was separation from deception. On the final day, asked to speak with me in an empty courthouse room. She looked older, not in her face, but in the way she moved, as if every decision now carried visible weight. I am leaving the state, she said. I heard. A nonprofit offered me administrative work. No title, no access to money. That may be good. She gave a small, bitter laugh. You always know how to make judgment sound like advice. I did not mean it as judgment. I know that may be worse. We sat in silence. I loved you once, she said. I believe you. Did you love me? Yes. Do you still? The honest answer was not simple. I loved the woman who had painted the warehouse sign. I loved the wife who sat beside my hospital bed after surgery and read terrible mystery novels aloud because she knew I could not sleep. I loved memories that remained true even after the person inside them changed. I love who I believed we were, I said. She looked down. Was any of it real? Most of it. That is why the ending mattered. She nodded slowly. I keep replaying your messages, the agreement, the photograph, the warning before the vote. You had choices. I thought they were threats. Because Victor told you they were. Because I needed them to be. That was the most honest thing she had said. When we left the room, she walked toward one elevator and I toward another. Neither of us looked back. That evening, I returned to the house alone. Most of its belongings were gone. Pale rectangles marked the walls where her photographs had hung. The dining table remained beneath the light where she had placed the divorce papers. I opened a drawer and found an old photograph from its opening day, and I stood beneath the hand-painted sign, smiling as if endurance guaranteed permanence. For several minutes, I held the picture. Then I placed it back. Healing did not require destroying every memory. It required removing memory's authority over the future. I walked through each room, not to mourn the marriage, but to decide what still belonged to me. My father's books, the chipped blue mug from the warehouse, a wooden clock had bought at a street market during our first vacation. I kept the clock. The next morning, I called a real estate agent and listed the house. Friends asked whether I was running from the past. No, I said, I am refusing to live inside it. The house sold within 3 weeks. On my final night there, rain struck the windows just as it had when handed me the papers. I stood in the empty dining room and listened. I had once believed power meant preventing loss. Now I understood that some losses must be accepted before they become prisons. I turned off the light, closed the door, and left the keys on the counter. My new home was smaller, closer to the river, and almost empty when I moved in. I bought one table, 2 chairs, and a lamp for the window. For the first time in years, every object entered because I chose it, not because it belonged to a shared version of the future. The quiet no longer felt like abandonment. It felt unclaimed. On Sunday mornings, I walked to the old warehouse and returned by the long route along the water. I learned that beginning again is rarely dramatic. It is making coffee in an unfamiliar kitchen, hanging one picture, and discovering that peace can arrive without asking the past to approve it. A year after the boardroom confrontation, held its annual meeting in the warehouse where it had begun. The restored sign hung behind the stage. Employees owned part of the company now. Had become permanent chief executive after leading the recovery with more integrity than Victor had shown in all his celebrated years. I remained chairman, but I no longer attended through a hidden audio line. Secrecy had protected me until it began protecting the wrong people. During the meeting, an analyst asked why I had not exposed Victor as soon as I discovered the stolen file. Wouldn't immediate action have been safer, he said. For the company, perhaps in the short term, I answered, but removing one man without exposing the system around him would have allowed the same corruption to return under another name. Another reporter asked whether I regretted setting the trap. I regret that it was necessary. Do you regret testing your wife? I regret that our marriage had reached a point where evidence felt safer than conversation. That answer did not make the headlines. The headlines preferred revenge. My wife left me for her CEO. Then I revealed I owned the company. The sentence was true and still failed to describe what happened. I had not won because I was secretly wealthy. Money gave me tools, not judgment. I had not won because, and Victor underestimated me. Their contempt created opportunity, but contempt alone does not defeat anyone. I survived because I did not allow humiliation to choose my next action. The night named Victor, I could have shouted. I could have exposed my ownership across the dinner table and watched fear replace her smile. That might have felt powerful for 10 minutes. It would also have warned them, scattered the evidence, and left vulnerable to everyone else involved. Restraint gave me time. Time revealed the directors willing to approve a dishonest vote. Time revealed the bank records, the second ledger, and Victor's plan to sacrifice. Time separated suspicion from proof. But restraint was not the same as passivity. Every day I remained silent, people were working. Every warning I gave was a real exit. Every document Victor signed moved him closer to consequences he had created himself. That is the distinction many people miss. Patience without preparation is only delay. Patience with purpose is power. After the annual meeting, I remained alone in the warehouse. The folding table from first office had been preserved in a glass display. On it sat one of our original computers, and a photograph of the founding team stood in the photograph beside me. The company archivist had asked whether I wanted her removed. No, I had said. History should not be edited to make us comfortable. She had helped in its early years. She had also tried to steal it later. Both truths belonged in the record. My phone vibrated with a message from an unfamiliar number. It was, "I am 1 year sober from the life I thought I wanted. I do not expect an answer. I am sorry." I read it twice. Then I placed the phone in my pocket without replying. Forgiveness does not always require reunion. Sometimes it means releasing the need to watch another person suffer. I no longer followed Victor's appeals. I no longer asked mutual friends about. Their consequences belonged to them. My future belonged to me. Outside, evening light spread across the river. Employees were leaving in small groups, laughing as they crossed the parking lot. Continued without Victor. It continued without. One day it would continue without me. That was not a threat to my importance. It was proof that I had built something stronger than importance. I switched off the warehouse lights and stood beneath the old sign one last time. Had mistaken calmness for weakness. Victor had mistaken privacy for insignificance. Both believed power announced itself with titles, expensive rooms, and people who applauded before the vote was finished. They learned too late that real power rarely needs to shout. It observes. It prepares. It acts once. At the moment, action can no longer be undone. Then it walks away without asking the room for permission. Before leaving, I opened the front doors and let the evening air move through the building. Somewhere behind me, the old clock in the training room marked the hour. I thought of my father, who had measured strength by how much pain a man could carry without stopping. I had inherited that belief and spent years refining it into silence. Now I understood strength differently. Strength was not carrying every burden alone. It was knowing which burdens belonged to you, which belonged to others, and which should be set down before they reshaped your character. I had protected, I had lost a marriage. I had kept my dignity without pretending I had escaped unharmed. That was enough. Not triumph, not revenge. Enough.
I see their eyes, they watch me fall. They laugh and think I've lost it all. I shut the doors, locked up inside, believing I've nowhere left to hide. But I'm drowning in my own doubt. I built the cage and locked it out. Trapped in failure, I can't escape. Stuck in the past, bound by fate. I scream for help and no one hears. I'm drowning in my deepest fears. I built the cave and locked it out. Trapped in failure, I can't escape. Stuck in the past, bound by fate. I scream for help and no one hears. I'm drowning in my deepest fears. They've forgotten who I am, the one who rose and took a stand. Now I'm silent, broken, small, but I refuse to lose it all. I built these walls, now I'll break through. No one can control what I do. I built these walls, now I'll break through.